Allison, if you go up to the top of your screen under View Options, that's where you can turn that video panel on. So on the side, it'll show everybody.
Thank you. I have switch camera, and I'll just be looking for that. Thank you.
All right, folks, I've got 9 o'clock if we're ready to go. Is everybody ready to go?
Yeah.
The answer is yes?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, good morning. I'm going to welcome all those that are here, and thank you, Budget Committee, for being with us, and anybody else that's out there watching. This is the official Budget Committee meeting for the month of April. And like to just open us with prayer, if you would. Pray with me. Father, we just thank you for all the blessings you bestow upon us. Thank you for this beautiful morning and this beautiful season of the year. Father, we just ask your blessing on our community, on our nation, as we deal with this virus and all of the issues that it's caused, all of the folks that are struggling in business, large and small. Father, we just ask today that you give us guidance as we work through issues and our budget for this 2021 fiscal year. We pray all these things in your precious Son's name. Amen. All right, first order of business is to determine whether or not we are an essential function. And so if you please take a look at the agenda items that we have today, and in reviewing them, I'm going to submit to you that they are essential business of the county as they're related to the ongoing budget process and for items that keep the county departments functioning. So at this time, I would ask if there's any objection to the declaration of essential business, or if there are any changes to the agenda this morning. Hearing no objection, we will move forward with the agenda as submitted. And the first item for consideration on there is the approval of minutes from March 11th, April 8th, and April 9th Budget Committee meetings. Are there any additions or corrections to any of those minutes?
Move for approval.
Is that approval for all 3, Commissioner Wheeler?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. We have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
There'll be a second from Commissioner Light. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so we have approved minutes for those meetings, all 3 of those meetings. Actually, 2 of them were merely hearings, and the March 11th meeting was a full Budget Committee meeting. So the first item on our list this morning are budget amendments that were approved by the mayor. So other than Commissioner Light, I know you've not seen these. Were you able to get on the website?
I couldn't get it.
Couldn't get it. Okay.
Hey,
Okay.
All right. So
Commissioner Light, check your email. I sent you an email with the attachment. You
Okay.
have it.
All right.
So there's several things on here, two of which have already seen the light of day and been approved by the budget committee on the meeting of March 11th. That would be the ADA ramp for courtroom number 3 in the Justice Center, and the ag extension salary amendment. So those actually have already been approved by the budget committee. This merely reflects the actual moving of the funds.
Mayor, if I might interject, there's actually, as you all know, there's 3 different budget amendments. One that the mayor can make, one that the budget committee make, and the third is one that the commission makes. Our software, and it's just a technical issue, we put all the mayor and the budget committee amendments into the form that you have in front of you that's called budget transfers. There's another function within our software that provides for budget resolutions or revisions that actually impact fund balance in multiple departments. And so that's where those are generally posted. So you'll see as we go through the months and the years, this schedule on the screen actually has both the mayor and the budget committee approved.
All right, so this is a little bit different, Mitch. Maybe when we look at this again, we can highlight the ones that are specifically from the mayor, so that that's clear for everyone.
I kind of took it the other way. I kind of highlighted the ones that the budget committee had authorized, but yeah. Okay.
Either way, all right. Any questions on these transfers and so forth? All right, very good. Then we'll move on to the next item. The first item for the budget committee to consider as an amendment is from the Ag Extension office, and this is, you'll recall that the county actually has 1 employee there, and what the University of Tennessee did for all of the ag office folks that are currently working from home was to provide them a $50 a month stipend for cell phone cost or whatever. And so this covers 3 months worth of cost for our very own employee over there. So this, if I could get a motion for approval on this from the budget committee.
So moved.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, that would be a motion from Commissioner Light, and a second.
Second.
Who's that? Commissioner England?
Commissioner England, yes.
Thank you, sir. All right, second from Commissioner England. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Now, that'll just be reflected in the minutes, but not be considered by the full commission. Next is fund balance projection. Mitch, do you have any commentary on it?
You have the budget amendments that you recommended to the full commission back in March on showing its proposed resolution, since the commission is not held. But other than it is what it is.
Yeah, and you'll see in a little while well, anyway, we'll see this a little more in detail later. Any commentary or anything we need to talk about on this, or any questions relative to the fund balance projection report? All right. Next item for consideration of budget amendments that do require commission approval. So we'll start with the Highway Department. He is requesting a transfer of $102,800 from his fund balance for actually 2 different items. What he's looking to do is to have engineering work done for Glendale Bridge and a Glendale intersection at Route 81. So if you've ever traveled out there and hit that Glendale Road from 81, you'll probably appreciate an upgrade there. Anyway, any questions on this one? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion approved by Commissioner Malone and a second by Commissioner Light. Is there any discussion on this?
I would just like to add, this is for engineering.
This engineering and design, right?
Yes.
Okay. And is there anything you'd like to add, Mr. Deakins, to what I said about it?
No, I mean, this is just for engineering and design. And it'll take probably at least a year or more to get all this done. We're just trying to work with TDOT to see if we can try to get some money on the Glendale realignment at 81, but that's what our meeting was with Paul Diggs about in Nashville when we had the tornado. We haven't had that meeting yet, so, but they do have the plans in Knoxville. So we're working with them in Knoxville right now.
Mr. Deakins, is there a possibility you think that we might get some safety improvement funds for that from them?
The last time I checked, they were out of safety money. Plus, it didn't qualify because over the last 3 years, they hadn't had any accidents there, which is hard to believe. But,
it is hard to believe.
Yeah. So, no, it did not qualify. So I'm taking a different approach, trying to get some money somewhere else from TDOT on that if I can.
Okay, thanks.
If I may clarify, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to point out to your committee today that this will be a single resolution and it will be broken down. Does that suit your needs, Mr. Deakins?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Thank you, sir.
Got it. All right, any additional discussion? Okay, we'll vote on this now by roll call. There's someone who is going to call the roll. Is that you, Sherry? Okay, Sherry's going to call the roll.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so Commissioner Wheeler,
Yes.
Commissioner Malone,
Yes.
Commissioner England,
Yes.
Commissioner Light,
Yes.
Mayor Grandy.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next item thank you. That's approved and moves forward to the full commission. Next item for consideration is appropriation to Northeast State for Washington County dual enroll scholarships. This is mostly CTE scholarships. You have the information there. We had done this with them for a number of years in the past. Last year, we put that money into scholarships, but did not specifically designate it for Northeast State. And so Northeast State, as you can see, has assisted this past year 43 CTE students, generating 270 credit hours at a cost this past year that they say was $32,270. They're asking for us to scholarships again with that money. It was budgeted and just need to reallocate it to Northeast State Tech. Is there a motion for approval?
I make the motion.
All right, motion for approval from Commissioner Light. Is there a second?
I will second the motion. This is Freddie Malone.
All right, we have a second from Commissioner Malone. Is there discussion?
I did just want to confirm we have budgeted these dollars. This is just to allocate it specifically to Northeast State, correct?
We had, yes, these $25,000 was budgeted in last year, yes, but not allocated to Northeast State.
And I'm sorry, I'm not understanding that. It looks like it's coming out of undesignated fund balance. Am I looking at the wrong?
Yeah, there's not there will not be a budget amendment for this. The money is already in 58,500,316.
Okay, very good. Understand.
But there will be a resolution, correct, Mitch?
Yes, the commission will have to approve the appropriation or donation, if you will, to Northeast State for this.
Thank you, sir.
All right, additional discussion?
Normally included in the appropriation resolution we do in June, which names all the specific nonprofits, the fire departments, et cetera. So the commission would need to approve the payment. And I might add that, Northeast State they've had a cadre of kids go through from Boone and Crockett this last year who have not had to pay anything out of pocket for their dual enrollment classes. And if Northeast State was kind of scratching their head on what they were going to do on how to get those tuition amounts paid, if they were going to have to go back to the parents or to the school system, or how they were going to do that. So,
all right, additional discussion? All right, we're ready to vote. Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Wheeler,
Yes.
Commissioner Malone,
Yes.
Commissioner England,
Yes.
Commissioner Light,
Yes.
and Mayor Grandy.
Yes. All right, that will move forward to the full commission as a motion for approval. The next item for consideration, and the final one for budget requiring a resolution, is under economic development, additional funding for the TIF district. You can see in there that last year we budgeted
$475.
Yeah, $475,000. The TIF district values expanded by something like $13 million, which required us to pay $552,592 to the TIF district fund, which would show we obviously have a shortfall of $80,592. So I guess the good news in that is that those property values increased and the TIF district is working. The unfortunate part is that, we're paying a lot more money into it than we had originally planned. Mitch, do you want to add to that or clarify?
Yeah, they had, one of the purposes of the TIF district was actually to generate revitalization of a blighted area, and I think that came not fully came home, but significantly had a significant impact in this last reappraisal. As you can see, the bump up in the values within the district itself, in excess of $13 million in assessed values. So, the funding is obviously doing what it's supposed to do.
You can see in the packet, the calculations and so forth there. We owe the money. What we have done is we have sent them the amount of money that we had budgeted so that we could get that moved forward. And then if this is approved, we will send them the balance. So is there a motion for approval on this?
I have one more question if I could before.
Sure.
Looking at this coming out of unassigned fund balance and looking over at the fund balance projections for after today, that puts us at over $1 million deficit. And the commission's not addressed that yet. If we're going to have to change this policy, that's something that, my understanding, this committee can't do. And I'm concerned that we're putting the commission in a position where they don't have any choice but to do one thing, which is change that policy. Am I wrong on that? Is there money that we expect will come back in this large an amount?
I think the answer to that is no. Mitch, do you have a different opinion?
In this current year, and when we get to the last item on the agenda, the the fund balance projection you see on the screen now is based on the budget numbers. We have made of some projections to the end of the year as to what actual fund balance will be that we'll share with you at the end of the, get down to the FY21 numbers. So we need to have, an expectation of what our fund balance is going into FY21 to be able to project those fund balances at the end of FY21. So.
But it wouldn't preclude us from changing the policy or asking the commission whether they will change the policy before we spend money that we don't have allocated to spend.
You do have, and as you see that when you get to the last slide, or when we get to the FY21, FY20 projection, keep in mind that we also, you all adopted a $900,000 transfer from debt service into the general fund, which we have not pulled the trigger on. So that would mitigate some of the in the general fund balance. I mean, there are some financial, that's one financial structure, one structural transaction that you can do to preserve that fund balance.
And not have to change the policy.
Pardon me?
And in that case, we would not have to change the policy.
Just depends on where the numbers come up to, Commissioner Wheeler. I mean, it's a $900,000 transfer. And right now, if you look at this screen, we're $1 million. We're $1 million short. So you would have $100,000. If the numbers played out that way, you'd have $100,000 deficit below your balance policy.
Do we have any idea this year how much will come back from the Sheriff's Department?
No, sir, we don't. We've done some projections just based on April, May, and June numbers of 19 to take us through the end of June of 2020. By taking our March numbers, which you all have, and then pulling April, May, and June from last year in terms of operational costs, dropping those in. But we don't. How much we get in terms of prisoner board, if there's a delay in getting billings out and we don't receive the funds within 60 days after the end of the year, we can't count them in the current year. There's some things that we do need to be sure that we're moving forward on to alleviate or to make sure the revenues are making it into the county's coffers. We are going to be, and I'll get to this, get to the FY20 numbers. There's a couple of state revenues or locally shared revenues that we're not going to see normally that we get in June, which are, I want to say somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 in total. And that's our business tax and our hall income tax. As those filing deadlines were moved into July, we won't be receiving those dollars until, after August. So they won't be current year. We've taken those out of our current year income projections.
And one final question, moving that $900,000 from debt service, does that require a vote of the commission?
It has been budgeted. I think what would need to happen, I'll defer that question probably to Allison, but my gut reaction is that it's been budgeted. It would call or the mayor handle. Allison, do you have any comment?
Could you reframe the actual issue about moving the $900,000? What is the exact question?
There's the commission budgeted a transfer from the debt service fund to the general fund last year in its budget adoption. State law doesn't allow you to transfer dollars during the year without it being a part of the original budget. But what happens is you start moving pennies it's a backdoor way to move pennies from one fund to another.
Mhm.
The public has the ability to comment on the tax rate and where those pennies go. So you can't make any transfers between funds unless you've budgeted for them in your initial appropriation budget.
Correct.
So the question was, if you don't, and the reason the budget committee and the commission adopted that was to backstop the fund balance of the general fund so that it met the policy
Yes.
in place. So the question is who makes the call on making that move?
And there was an amount appropriated for this payment, just not enough. Is that because we're still working on this resolution, and I want to be sure, if I can provide additional insight. There was an amount allocated or appropriated, one or the other, and I defer to you on Mitch, which is the appropriate language there, but just not the amount that matches the percentage based on the current assessment. So there's a shortfall in what the county would be obligated to Johnson City.
We won't know if there's a shortfall until we're past June 30th. The crystal ball, we can take it, we can do a projection, but we don't have a crystal ball that's going to actually tell us what those future numbers are. The 900,000 may be enough. It may be more than enough. It may not be enough. The question, I think, is who has the authority to make that transfer? Yes.
Okay. Well, if I could take that under advisement and circle back before the full meeting so that the resolution reflects the authority of either the committee. I don't know if that helps today. When does the trustee have to disperse the funds?
Well, we somebody makes the decision to do that, and that's what the question is who makes that call.
Well,
yeah,
go ahead.
If I may, Chair, I guess either I didn't follow that conversation, and that's one of the challenges of doing this on video, or Allison misunderstood Mitch's question. As I understood Mitch's question, it didn't relate to the TIF monies. It related to the transfer of funds from the debt service fund or balance to the general fund. Did I misunderstand that, or Mitch, was that your question?
Yeah, you're correct. These are two completely different issues. This doesn't have to do with...
It sounded as if Allison was trying to answer the question relative to the TIF monies.
Thank you, Commissioner Malone. That I can see where it sounded that way. And the reason I was circling back to the obligation is because the actual resolution that gave rise to the question was framed in the context of meeting a contractual obligation or an obligation. It may actually not be contractual, but meeting this obligation. So I was looking for the time frame that we, the county, would need to ensure that this money from the fund balance was in the general fund to make that payment. So I was really just trying to look at where this decision rested in the timeline. But you're exactly right. The two don't connect as to the issue.
Allison, the payment to the JCDA is not in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion, predicated on whether we transfer money from debt service to the general fund. Our debt service policy, our general fund balance policy is a point in time determination. And that point in time is made at June 30th. So
I follow you.
Okay. So it does not, I hear Commissioner Wheeler in that, are we creating, a stress or issue that we're going to have to deal with? Well, I submit to you that during this year and now with how we're going to end up at the end of the year, I think we kind of knew this was coming. So, yeah, it's going to be something we'll have to deal with.
And of course, this payment and or transfer impacts that significantly. So there's no question about that, Commissioner Wheeler. You're exactly right.
Well, and Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong. When I look at the projected fund balances, your worksheet, I do not like the projected $1 million unrestricted fund balance. I don't like that. But when I look at the actual budget amendments we've made this year, the 331, and that includes the TIF monies, the bulk of the 331 is the 210 for forensic pathology, which actually in the original budget presented to the full commission, it had been budgeted. And then that night at the commission meeting, it was removed. Those were monies we knew we were going to have to pay anyway. They just removed it from the budget, or we did. So the bulk of the amendments we've made so far this year is for the pathology, which was originally budgeted. So in some ways I look at it and go, I don't like the $1 million unrestricted fund balance, but we've really not had that many budget amendments this year that have negatively impacted the fund balance, the general fund balance. Because if 210 makes up the 331, that's the biggest bulk of it. And again, that was monies we were going to have to pay. There wasn't any way around it. Am I mischaracterizing that? And I guess I'm directing that question to Mitch.
No, I mean, I think you're on target. If you look up on the fourth line on that page, I mean, we budgeted a $720
right
deficit. If you add the 210 to it, you're at 900 and some change. So, I mean, coming into the year, we knew we had that budget deficit.
My point being though that you're right about that, and we budgeted to pull that 900,000 from the debt service,
correct,
which would have brought it back into balance. And my concern,
that's part of the 20, Commissioner.
I'm sorry.
That's the 900,000 is included in that $720,000 deficit.
It's already been added in.
I mean, the 720 includes $9,000 of revenue from debt service. Had we not moved the 900, we would have had a $1.6 million deficit.
So, Jim, I think what he's saying is that the 900,000 is not going to clear the $1 million unrestricted negative fund balance.
Is that correct, Mitch?
If the year ends up as budgeted, that is correct. If we have, savings in a multitude of departments, does that total end up being enough to offset the deficit spend?
So if a department turns back over 500,000, it reduces that million by
correct 500.
But we don't reduce it by the 900.
That's correct, because that's already factored in to the 720.
Okay, and that's where
on this schedule, when we get to the end, I mean, when we start talking about the FY21 budget, we've got an actual projection based on projected actuals, not just on the budget numbers, that you'll see where the fund balances are actually projected as opposed to our reserve requirements.
So I think that puts us back to, regardless of when that 900,000 gets transferred over, and I can understand that may need to wait till we see how much comes back in from other departments. But assuming they don't turn in $1 million, then that money's got to come from somewhere. And the commission is the one who should be deciding whether we're going over what we've got or not. And I don't like the idea that we're committing the commission to, or we're leading them to, they've got to approve this, obviously, to do that without knowing where that's coming from. Maybe that conversation needs to take place at the commission level, but at some point, the commission needs to be aware that we're going to have to come up with, $1 million minus whatever gets turned back in.
Right.
And that we don't expect it to be $1 million turned back in.
That very
But
well could be.
I think we have to pay this, and I don't have any problem with this resolution, but I think I would much rather the commission be dealing with this before the end of the fiscal year rather than after, and then we have to answer questions about, why did we let them get over budget without bringing it to their attention that they're going to have to deal with that by changing the policy in all likelihood.
Yeah, and I think that's really good commentary, Jim, and we need to be doing that. One of the things that, we could possibly continue this discussion, as we begin to look at projections for wrapping up this year, as well as what we're looking at going into next year, both from a revenue perspective and expenses, which we'll use just today to sort of wrap up the meeting and set the stage for, I think what you're talking about is going forward with an understanding of what we're facing next year. That makes sense.
Yes, sir.
So with respect to this obligation, so I think we are at the point where we'll take a motion one way or the other on this transfer.
I will make that motion, and then I do have two additional questions, but I'll make the motion to approve the resolution for the payment or the use of these funds to fulfill the payment of the TIF monies.
We have a proper motion for approval to transfer these funds. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion, Commissioner England.
All right, we have a second from Commissioner England, and the motion was from Commissioner Malone. Now, discussion on the motion.
Well, I think several people kind of referenced this, and I just want to make sure I understand, but we do actually have a contractual obligation to pay these funds, right? I mean, this is what was approved with the TIF agreement, 10, 11 years ago. And so we actually have a contractual obligation to pay these funds. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Just point of order, Commissioner Malone, because the resolution will reflect that it is to conform with the adoption of the redevelopment plan. It actually probably won't use the word contract. There's not a contract per se. I know that that's
right.
a general term, but just for the purpose of preciseness, the county's obligation will be recited in the resolution in front of you through the resolutions creating the obligation.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask this question, not fully understanding, and I don't want to take us too far off topic, but Mitch, I know that I have heard at several different levels, including at the JCDA level, that were the county to approve our TIF arrangement to conform with the state requirements, that it would actually reduce the county's payment or obligation under the plan by roughly $50,000. Is that correct? And if that's true,
Commissioner, if you'll look at this, that's what this. I can get this thing. Hang on, mate. I can get this thing to get a little larger so you guys can see it. What that actually does, if you can see, this schedule calculates the TIF contribution based on the current agreement, which is a calculation based on the assessment value. The JCDA proposed about a year or so ago changing that calculation to a determination of the contribution based on the tax, the amount of actual tax that's collected. And so you see the last 4 or 5 columns is the current agreement and then what the JCD proposed. And for FY19, it would have been a $95,000 savings to the county been adopted.
Which means we would be looking at a plus 15,000 as opposed to an expense of 80. So
correct.
When Commissioner Malone and the other JCDA folks proposed that to the county for ratification, I think what you're talking about is bringing the TIF agreement into current state status. That would have saved us this money, but we're not quite there. So
I think the big question for many of the commissioners will be, okay, it would have saved us $95,000, almost $96,000. What else comes along if we adopt the state guidelines? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that's something a lot of the commissioners will want to understand in addition to the proposed savings. And Mitch, I like your work. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that, that proposal was made to the full commission in pretty much detail, but it's been a year or so ago. So it might not be a bad idea to bring some of that information back in a refreshment. At what point would you like to see that come back to the full commission? Because it's my understanding that your JCDA group was prepared to bring that to the commission at some point this year.
Yeah, I think it was getting teed up when, to happen, perhaps this month or May. And I think, like a lot of things, that's perhaps been put on hold or at least is uncertain in light of the pandemic. But we have a JCDA meeting Friday. I can ask the question. Okay.
I think that'd be helpful.
And then, Mitch, I do like your worksheet. And I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. But to the point that the TIF district is having the impact intended, if I understand your worksheet correctly, the assessed value of the properties inside the district in 2008 were just over $57 million. And with the reassessment in 2019, they're over $103 million. And so clearly there's been a lot of growth in the tax base there. We're not recognizing
doubled at $46 million.
Yeah. So that's a positive. We're not recognizing the benefit of that increase yet, but the county will one day.
Right.
Well, I think it's fair to say that we will recognize it one day. That's exactly right. And that particular district, if you just carve it out and look at it separately, it was by far the fastest growing area in the entire county by far. I mean, the county average assessment change last year, if I remember right, was just a little over 12%. So as you can see, huge change here. Anyway, all right, so additional discussion. Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yes.
Commissioner Malone?
Yes.
Commissioner England?
Yes.
Commissioner Light?
Yes.
Mayor Grandy?
Yes. All right, that'll move forward to the full commission. The recommendation for approval. Next item on here is just essentially we're just asking for the budget committee and the full commission to approve a request to the state for unclaimed property. It's something that we do every year. Is there a motion to that effect?
So
I'll
moved.
make a motion.
All right, we have a Commissioner Light with motion to ask for the unclaimed property from the state treasurer. Then the second from Commissioner Wheeler.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any discussion on this? Call the roll, please, Sherry.
Commissioner Wheeler,
Yes.
Commissioner Malone,
Yes.
Commissioner England,
Yes.
Commissioner Light,
Yes.
Mayor Grandy.
Yes. All right. We'll make that move to the full commission. All right. Next item for really just information at this point is the updated forensics contract with ETSU. You'll note when you get over there to page 3 or 4, the schedule of the revenue, $285,506.16 this year, as opposed to $281,431 last year, for $4,069 change, a little less than 1.5% increase for the same level of services. This has been presented to the county for consideration, and it'll obviously, this or some amount will become part of the budget moving forward. Just wanted to get this out there in front of you early, as we consider it. It is a contract, so we'll wait to be sure it gets funded before it gets signed. Any questions or comments with respect to that? I know it got a lot of discussion last year.
Well, the public safety is probably going to want to look at the numbers. What I'm hearing from board members from EMS is they don't believe they're seeing much change in those autopsy numbers. But I realize we need to look at those a little differently than they get them. But is there any plan for that to go back to public safety? I know the discussion last year at public safety was we would look and see after our discussion with them whether things improved.
Yeah, I think obviously that's the place where most of it got heard last year, and so you're right. Actually, the way they start, the way they look at, they being the forensic center, look at their numbers and so forth. They are on a calendar year, so we'll have to take the second half of last year and add the first half of this year to it to sort of see where the numbers are lining up. So I get those reports every month. I'll put that together and we'll get it before public safety. I don't know. You want to do it probably ought to do it in May. Give everybody a chance to sort of see where we are.
Yes, sir. If you see that the numbers aren't changing, I would suggest they're going to want to talk to folks from ETSU again if the numbers are not changing. I think that was sort of my understanding of the consensus. I had to leave that meeting with them a little early, but my understanding after the meeting was that that we needed to give them a chance to see if they could turn some of those numbers around. But if they haven't, I think there's going to need to be some discussion about why not, or I'm afraid we're going to run into a lot of resistance about the contract. Okay.
So with that, and this really isn't the place for it. I'll get you offline and try to understand how to help move the process forward. So, and would we want to try to understand what alternatives would be, as potentially taking this service to Knoxville or someplace else, or what are your thoughts there? Okay, well, I'll get back with you on that. We can, anyway, again, this has been presented to us for consideration to move forward with the same program as we've had it in the past. And it's in the packet really today for information only. We'll have to as we move forward with our budget, we'll have to be budgeting some amount of money for an autopsy service. And I guess my question was, do we need to be looking for alternatives to this?
It may be more that we're looking at the fact that we don't have much alternative to this, but yes, I think the commission ought to be aware of that, and the committee, because that should impact the decision. I can't find this in the packet that I printed out, and I don't know whether that was from the website or emailed, and I've looked at the packet just now on the website, and there's nothing in there on this. Is this emailed out to us, or?
May have just come in, so we'll get that both on the website and a copy to you. We'll send it out by email. How about that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Weaver. I thought I was the only one that didn't have that in the packet.
Apologies on that.
It did come in at the last minute, so it wasn't included in the packet.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. March financial statements have been distributed. They are on the website. Mitch, anything particular there, or does anybody have any questions with respect to them?
We'll take any questions, but don't forget to back up to number 10.
Oh, good grief. You're right.
But while we're on March financials.
All right. Really, there's not much on the financials. Thank you. Apologize for that. Skip number 10. So employee health insurance benefits, is Michelle on the line?
I am. I'm here.
You want to run through this real quick from your perspective?
Hey, let me add that they'll see 3 different schedules, which are your 3 spreadsheets. The one you're looking at right now is a $200,000 individual or specific deductible. The other 2 spreadsheets represent a $210,000 and a $220,000 specific deductible. And you'll be able to see in a few minutes what those premium differences are for those 3 different scenarios. But it wasn't clear, just they all 3 look the same. So that's what I wanted to point out, is that those 3 pages are different, and it's different because of the impact of that specific stop loss deductible. All yours, Michelle.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, all. Hopefully I'm bringing you the best news of the morning, health insurance renewal. For me and our broker, it's great news, and for the employees, it's really good news. We did present renewal to the Employee Benefits Committee, but at that time, we did a estimated stop loss. We do that every year because stop loss can't be firmed up until about the middle of April. So we always present early April with the committee an estimated number. We firm up that number with stop loss and then bring the final number to the commission meeting. It came in just a little early. This time it came in last Friday. Stop loss, we had anticipated a 15% increase just as the worst case scenario. So that's what we presented to the committee on April 2nd. But when stop loss has been returned at the $200,000 specific deductible, which we're at now, Blue Re, our current carrier, comes in below current at about 8.1%. So that's phenomenal news. Last year, we moved from 150 stop specific deductible up to 200,000. The broker is not recommending we go to 210 or 220,000. We do have a couple of claims that are close to that if they had received treatment in the whole year, they would have gone over that specific deductible, but they were diagnosed midway or partially through the year, so they've not gotten close to that. So we are recommending the 200,000 specific deductible with Blue Re, who is our current provider. And I do want to include, from my standpoint, Blue Re is very smooth and easy to work with. When we were with a third party in the previous years, we paid the claim and then that party reimbursed us. With Blue Re, once that claim hits the specific, we stop paying. So there's no reimbursement back to us. We stop paying, the reinsurance picks up. So we don't have to prepay claims and then get reimbursed. The broker does feel like that is an excellent quote, and it is an 8.1% reduction. But what the Employee Benefits Committee saw and heard on the 2nd was our high anticipated number. So our renewal looks great. There are no plan design changes. There are no cost changes to the employee. And then with this will also enable us to keep that fund balance number in effect with what the commission has looked at previously of a 6-month fund balance. Do you have any questions about the stop loss?
Michelle, let me show them real quick. If you look at this schedule for a $200,000 stop loss, the cost to the county is $439,877. The using the $220,000 stop loss, that premium would drop to $415. So as Michelle alluded to, it would only take one case that exceeded that stop loss to blow it, to go ahead and make the total cost more with a smaller premium or a higher stop loss, if you will. So that was in essence the break even point was about a $20,000. If you only have one $20,000 excess stop loss, I mean a 220 versus a 200, you're going to save some money. Or if you have multiple ones, I should say, that are in excess of 200, then you're going to save some money by having the lower stop loss.
All right, so I guess in short on this, recommendation is to accept the Blu-ray group and the reduced premium rate and keep the stop loss at $200,000. That's the recommendation. So there would be a motion for that, or there are additional questions?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
A proper motion from Commissioner Wheeler to accept the recommendation, and a second from, who was that?
I think you had two, Commissioner Malone and Commissioner Light.
All right, we'll give this.
You can choose.
Commissioner Malone, thank you. Additional discussion? All right, then we'll vote. Sherry, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Wheeler,
Yes.
Commissioner Malone,
Yes.
Commissioner England,
Yes.
Commissioner Light,
Yes.
Mayor Grandy.
Yes. All right, so that will be approved and move forward to the budget process.
Mr. Mayor, can I just confirm here from the agenda with Michelle, this is the same issue that was in front of employee compensation, correct?
Yes, it was. We presented the renewal with a 15% increase as the top worst case scenario, but we have the firm numbers back. So those are the firm numbers.
Thank you. And I'm just looking at the agenda today, since we've been working electronically, I want to ensure this will not be a resolution. This is information that the committee and the commission will be using with the full budget. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
I think that's correct, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Next item for information only is the sales tax report. Once again, it's a really good number, but remembering that our sales tax report reflects activity 2 months ago before the change of our world. So anyway, that is what it is. And so any questions or comments with respect to that? Okay. Moving to the last items, I'm just going to combine these. The first thing you'll see is probably a letter from the comptroller, talking about their expectations for the budget process. And the very first thing was, and it may have been a letter prior to this, is that they expect us to complete the budget on time or early. Do not look for any opportunities to do it later. And so, Mitch, I'll just turn it over to you because we have a lot of budget information, but I think starting with the comptroller's letter is a good place to lead off.
Okay. Yeah, we received this from the new Betsy Knott, who's now head of the Division of Local Government Finance. It did some restructuring, but she was just, in essence, telling everybody to be vigilant and keep on working to get the budget, our budget in place by June 30th, which I don't see that we will have any really significant problem in doing that at this point. The other thing that she alluded to, and Allison may want to comment on this, but it was actually a new section to TCA that was enacted this year. Actually put the onus somewhat on the county legislative body by a change to title or section 49, which deals with education. And this is what 49 says, is that, the county legislative body's powers and duties, the duties of the legislative body shall be to A, B, and C. And we've now added D to that when the governor signed this back in, I believe, February, which essentially is just saying that we have to give the Board of Education, local education agency, a number for them to use in terms of what their expected revenues would be for this upcoming year. And that those numbers must comply with the local match requirement and the maintenance of effort requirement. So what I did was I reached out to CTAS, and they can actually run this a lot easier than I can. But this is a calculation of the local match would be. Our local required match is $25 million based on BEP funding and fiscal capacity and whatnot. Our maintenance of effort, essentially what we put into the school system the prior year, is $31,382,996. So in order to dot the I and cross the T, if you will, with respect to state statutes, the county commission will need to give the Board of Education a number. And Allison, you correct me if I'm wrong after you've had a chance to look at this, but what I'm going to recommend, what I would recommend to you all and to the county commission is to, essentially tell them that they're going to have the same numbers that they had last year in their budget, as you can see here on the screen. So having said all that, Allison, commissioners, comments, questions?
Well, I'll jump in there. Thank you, Mitch. Mitch shared this letter from the comptroller this week, and also this great information. And we're so fortunate to have CTAS. I haven't really studied it in any detail. I will be happy to do that. I think that Mitch, always does a great job working through the numbers and this sort of thing. If you need a recommendation later on, I'll be happy to provide it. I do think, though, that the issue that's raised in the comptroller's letter for y'all to remember, along with Mr. Mayor's comments about the budget schedule, is that Governor Lee did issue Executive Order number 16, allowing electronic participation, which is what we're doing today, and expressly notes, the essential business of the county, which is considering annual budgets and special budgetary items in response to COVID-19. So I just thought it was important to remind us that that's why we have the benefit of electronic participation on these meetings. So just to tie that together for y'all. Otherwise, I don't have any other comments. Thank you.
Mitch, I think this may be something that we need to take action on because this information, it seems to me, is important to Brad and his team over there putting their budget together. And aren't they required to present it to us on the 1st of May?
They are, in the statute change, there is no, unless legally you somehow tie it all together, there is no set date that you have to provide that revenue number. However, it does clearly say that the commission, the county legislative body, will provide that number to the Board of Education. Since we only have 2 more weeks essentially until May 1st, I think it would behoove us to send this thing to the full commission to have make a call and make that recommendation to the local Board of Education.
Yeah, I think my point was that the Board of Education is required to get us the budget by May 1st, right?
But they have to know what the revenue's going to be, and so
right. That's my point. We need to give this to them so they can, fulfill their requirement to us.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And statutorily, it's required to come from the commission.
All right. So, questions or thoughts on how we should approach a recommendation to the commission for revenue for the schools?
I assume part of the basis for talking about letting them know that the numbers would be the same as last year's because of the lack of growth and there's not new money this year. Is that accurate?
That is correct. We are only going to add right at $100 to the penny this year. So I mean, it's a negligible amount. So, as long as we're meeting our maintenance of effort with respect to the schools, the 31,382, I think that's where, we don't have any other revenue sources, unless we're going to generate some or create some.
And of course, they are reliant a lot on sales tax revenues, as we all know. And sales tax revenue, obviously, year to date is in good shape. But I think the expectation for the first quarter, at least of next year, is a pretty significant downward turn. Hopefully that's not going to be the case, but that would be the expectation. We do have the benefit of, thankfully, of the online sales revenue stream that is new to us this year, which we believe will be helpful, but at the same time, certainly very uncertain as to what that number would look like.
And that's one of the things we're projected in here under that line, local option sales tax. Is that correct?
Yes. Again, the recommendation is to give them the number that's indicated here, which is the same number as last year.
With us doing that revenue number now, what happens if that local option sales tax number is high and it comes in a good bit lower than that?
Then they would end up utilizing their fund balance.
We're not guaranteeing revenue, in other words.
Correct. Yeah, it's kind of you budget for it. The budget number is one thing. What actually occurs is something else. In past years, real quick, sales tax revenue used to, significantly by 5 or 6% exceed the budgeted sales tax number. Okay, when we had some strong growth. Well, from the commission's perspective, as soon as they raise that budget amount to that actual amount, you've increased your maintenance of effort. You can't go back. So, if it's more, it goes into their fund balance and they can use it for others. They can dip into their fund balance in years that it drops. But once you raise it from a budgetary standpoint, you've locked your maintenance of effort, so that if it were to, and I haven't participated in a year where sales tax revenue significantly dropped from the budget number. And what happens in the subsequent year, I'm sure that's laid out, but that's just, we haven't experienced that. So I couldn't tell you how you would manage that in that year or two.
Well, we still are required to maintain the MOU.
Which may mean you may be required to increase your property tax contribution, offset that loss in sales tax. But I think that would be in the subsequent year.
So again, if you look at sales tax year to date, you would say, we could probably, consider an increase, but it's, it's been robust, and we are lagging behind over 2 months. So I don't expect to finish the year this way in reality. And I think the real deficit that we'll see will occur in the first quarter of our next fiscal year.
So you need a motion to make a recommendation to the commission to set that amount?
Yes.
Well, and this is really just for budgeting purposes, right? I mean,
it is for budgeting purposes, but we are required to give it to them.
Right.
That's what the commission is. And actually, it's pretty helpful because, as you may recall in past years, what we get from a lot of times is just a lot of wish list that winds up getting reformed as we go through the process. And this might just save some of those steps. So do we have a motion to recommend to the commission?
I'll make that motion then, that for budgeting purposes, we instruct the school board to use essentially the same number from the county as last year.
All right, we have a proper motion for the recommendation to use the same revenue as last year for budgeting purposes for the school board. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Commissioner England. There's additional discussion.
This is anecdotal, but I think I heard on CNBC this morning that retail sales for the month of March were down nearly 9%. And so 9. And that was March. We weren't full bore into this thing in March, so, or only perhaps a few days, a week or so. So yeah, sales tax revenue is going to take a hit at least for a few months.
All right. Hearing no additional discussion, we'll vote on this. Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yes.
Commissioner Malone?
Yes.
Commissioner England?
Yes.
Commissioner Light?
Yes.
Mayor Grandy?
Yes. Okay, great. Mitch, back to you.
Okay. So
before you leave this topic, excuse me, Mitch, I just want to be clear. This is a recommendation, but will it be used in the budget process? It is not a resolution. Is that correct? How are you envisioning the commission taking recommendation?
I mean, I would think, to be clear to the Board of Education, it would be a resolution.
I think a resolution also.
All right. Thank you much.
You're welcome. Okay. Moving into, I guess, really the last item on the agenda, which is discussion of our FY21 budget. Hang on, let me find the right window here. A couple things I want to share with you. Is we were talking about, what kind of environment we're in. What you see in front of you is a graph of Washington County's total property tax revenue across all funds, not just the general fund, overlaid with some various economic stresses that have happened in our country over the last 20 years. And as you can see, the peak, the orange line, or whatever color that is, you can see where we actually had tax increases, at the 24% to 23%. That line actually graphs the year-over-year change in the tax revenue. But what's interesting is how the blue line stays fairly constant through those recessionary times, which I think any of us or all of us would realize that property taxes are a fairly inelastic source of revenue. So, I mean, they're going to stay constant. And just, piggybacking on, and this schedule is presents the sales tax revenue over that same period, which, shows you that it's a bit more inelastic. You can see here in the Great Recession, those numbers, the actual sales tax numbers did decline. Year over year changes were in the -5% and -2% range. You had a little bit of flattening, and I don't recall, what transpired in this term. These are our school sales tax numbers. Could have been impacted by ADAs, because as the ADA changes between Johnson City and Washington County, it has an impact on the amount of sales tax that the counties receive. But I just thought those two graphs were somewhat visually showed what happens with respect to sales tax versus property tax. From a county perspective, relying primarily on property tax is a good thing in terms of situations like we're in. This next screen I'm wanting to share with you is what I alluded to earlier, and this is actually a projection of our FY21 or FY20 numbers out to June 30. And so you will see that actually we're probably a little, if you look at the general fund, we may end up with a little bit more of a pressure point there than we have on our budget project or on our budget amendment projection form, predominantly because I think our restricted fund balances are going to be a little higher. We're looking at estimating about 2.7 million in restricted fund balance, which encompasses the archive fees, the data processing fees that the courts receive. We will have, at the end of this year, we will still owe, I believe it's $600,000 to ETSU for the Performing Arts Center, which is a restricted fund. We've received some money via the IDB that we've restricted. So those things are going to obviously take away from our unassigned reserves. So right now, Commissioner Wheeler, to your point, and this is without the $900,000 transfer from debt service, we are going to be about 1.4 million below our reserve policy at June 30. If April and June hold true to these projections, which again, as I told you on the outset, the April and June numbers we've dropped in for expenses are our April, May, and June 19 numbers. Those numbers may be slightly higher as a result of additional overtime related to COVID, and other things that are going on in this last quarter that we don't really know what all that's going to be yet. We have reduced the April and June revenue projections by the amount of the business tax and the hall income tax that we would normally receive in the month of June because of the deferral of the filing date by the Department of Revenue. That's the general fund. Solid waste, as you can see, we're down to less than a penny in reserve of $222,000. When we look at the next screen, which is preliminary projection of our FY21 numbers, again, as we talked about last week, when we talked to Mr. Baines about his fund's operations, we are going to have a negative fund balance if we don't do something structurally. You can see the highway, Mr. Deacon's fund's fairly solid. I have a debt service reserve projection, which I'll share with you in a minute. So you can see that we're meeting our debt service reserves fairly well. Sidebar, Mayor had asked me to do a little search, and I don't have the answers yet on existing debt that would currently be refundable or either refundable and callable or what am I trying to say? Renegotiated or in substance defeased in an advance refunding. So we've reached out to Raymond James to look at what, if any, outstanding debt we may have that we could get off the books in the near term while we're still in what will probably be a low interest rate environment for some time. The capital projects and self-insurance, those are kind of where we're projecting those, of course, those two funds to end up. When we move over to the FY21 budget numbers, we really haven't done any projections of those fund balances yet. We were still waiting on, and we got a final piece of it today when we saw the stop loss premium cost, and we'll go ahead forward with solidifying our projections on our self-insurance fund with Michelle. Let me jump over here. I want to share any questions on this screen, and then I want to jump over to the debt service reserve, and then we'll look at the FY21 fund balance projections. Any questions? Hearing none, I'm going to move on. Okay, what you have now in front of you is our debt service fund. And as you can, and we've built in a growth factor of 0.75% annual percent on the revenue stream. Our property taxes after FY20 and FY21 is at our is that where we're projecting those numbers to be based on the current debt service penny, 37 pennies. So you can see we're, as we, continue to make, for these next 2 or 3 years, we're making $13 million in debt service payments annually. That number will slowly decrease. I should add that this does not reflect, though, the impact of, and keep this in mind, well, we're really going to pay for that out of capital projects, so never mind. I was going to say with the lease payment for the Jonesboro School, although it'll be considered debt, the plan, at least at this point, fund that out of capital projects. At some point, it may be that it rolls over to the debt service fund and you fund it there. Any questions or comments on just this snapshot of the debt service reserves? All right. FY21 fund balance projections. When we take our numbers that we had off the previous slide, which projected the 6/30/20 balances, then based on the initial budgets, and again, there's still work for us to do on our revenue and expense projections for FY21. We're still the numbers in here for FY21 for the sheriff and the detention center, which are the biggest components of our budget, are the FY20 budget numbers. We're still waiting on budget information from the sheriff's department. But you can see as we get out here to the end of the year, our restricted fund balance is projected to drop slightly. But as you can see, we now have a little bit bigger gulf in our reserve requirement versus our unassigned reserves, due in part to almost a $3 million deficit spend. So while I said I think I feel very confident we'll have our budget ready by June 30th, we still have a lot of work to do. All right, not great news, but that is what it is.
Questions at this point?
And Mitch, just to clarify and confirm, the required reserve policy that reflects, an estimated or projected 14.3, the comparative number is the total projected fund balance, not the unassigned or unrestricted, correct? So we're comparing the 12.7 to the 14.3, and that's about the $1.6 million shortfall you referenced, correct?
I wish I could say that is correct, but I can't, because it's the unassigned reserve is what we've got a 4-month policy on.
So you're saying that we're going to be almost 4.2 behind?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's a projection for June 2021. Yeah. Assuming that we were to recommend a $3 million deficit spend, which
we're not.
I feel quite confident we're not going to do that. Other questions, comments? Mitch, anything else?
No questions, comments, direction. Yeah. Just
And Mitch, could you send us those two, this screen you're showing us now and the one before?
Yeah, and I will and I'll send you some schedules that go behind that, which were actually how we got to those projections.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Those two. So.
Hey, Mitch, while you're sending things, send the graphs you referenced earlier.
Okay, can do.
We'll get all that out email today, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, that's all I have, I guess.
Okay, very good. So what do y'all think about, we've not heard from Election Commission, we've not heard from the Sheriff's Department. I think those are the remaining big budgetary sectors. Would y'all be able to see if we can get those folks tuned up for next Wednesday morning to do with them what we have done with the other departments?
That works for me.
Me as well.
Me too.
Okay, very good. Well, then it's okay. Let's go ahead and plan and advertise and so forth a 9 o'clock meeting next Wednesday, and we'll get those two groups to focus on. They're both pretty good sized ones, so I think we can devote enough time and attention to them. Is there anything else that you would like to try to include in the next Wednesday session?
The committee anticipate that the election commission's budget will include a plan for what they intend to do after this one-year lease is expired.
Mr. Wheeler, I would hope so. About 6, maybe 8 weeks ago now, I sent the election commission a letter asking them for what their expectations were going into next year with respect to budgetary items, as well as this facility that they are currently leasing. So I would anticipate that, and I will, when we set it up with them, I'll be sure that that will be addressed. They've had a lot of time to work on it.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, they have submitted their operating budget for next year. We have built that in, and it does not have anything in there other than a lease payment and the attendance, utilities, et cetera, for the past site.
Right, that was my recollection. Okay, good deal. All right. Was there anything else, commissioners, that you'd like to see next Wednesday? I mean, not to put you on the spot, but if you could get that to us as soon as possible so that we advertise correctly the information that will be before the group next week.
Or give me time to crunch some numbers.
Yeah. Well, more than an hour, right?
Yeah, more than an hour would be nice.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Was there any other business?
I just have one thing before we adjourn.
Sure.
I've been here real quiet today. Hey, I wanted to thank you for your letter for my employees. They were very appreciative of that for Telecommunicators Week, and just wanted to thank you and tell you, man, they really appreciate the letter. It was a tough day yesterday, and thank you so much, buddy.
Well, in your world, a lot of times it's a tough day. So we, thank the 911 folks for all they do and how they connect EMS and the fire professionals and our other public services, sheriffs and police and so forth with the community. It's amazing work. So thanks for that. Is there any additional business to come before the committee today? Hearing none, then we are adjourned. We'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks.
Thank